terms of how to handle it, I think that there's multiple answers there. I think that it can be really helpful to you as a person who is nonconforming in whatever way. It can be really helpful to have your friends and your allies speaking up for you.
Yeah.
And making it clear that, like, hey, this is not a space where I'm going to let you behave this way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, going out of your way to just kind of correct someone in the middle of their sentence even. Just like, oh, they.
Yeah.
Like, that's, it can be done in a way that isn't disrespectful. And that isn't, like, performative.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's so important to have allies who are willing to speak up for you, because it can be so hard to be in that position knowing someone does not respect you and to just be silent and not speak up for yourself.
Yeah.
I've been out as a trans man for, I want to say, close to like 4 years now, and I still really struggle to like stand up for myself when someone misgenders me.
Yeah.
And like, I like to think that my identity is pretty straightforward. I'm not breaking a lot of boundaries by like being masculine presenting, I hope, and being a trans man. But there are still people who show me, I go out in public and people show me that they perceive me in a different way that I perceive myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I encounter a lot of times where I question, like, well, I don't think that it's really relevant for me to tell this person who's like giving me some food, like, thanks, not a lady.
Yeah.
Bye. Like, a lot of interactions I find maybe don't need it, and I struggle to kind of insert myself in this, like, not really.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that being even harder for someone who is non-binary, because you're maybe in this position where you need to explain your identity. It is something that's a new concept. I am not, that said, I'm not the kind of person who finds it to be a good use of my time to try to change people.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is set in their ways, I think it's a waste of my energy to
it's
try
not
to
your
change.
job.
Yes, it is not my job to try to change their ideas. And I like to think that, like, simply by being a nice person to them, despite however they may think, maybe I can change your mind that way just by being myself and without sacrificing anything of my own time.
Yeah, and I think it's super important for allies to stand up for their friends, because not to say that's what allies are for, but in a way, like, you are there to support the group, and in any situation it's hard to stand up for yourself. And I feel like in any situation I'd stick up for my friends, but especially in a situation where there's prejudice being put on them, because those situations, like, there's just no way to gauge them. You never know, like, how safe the person is, like, what that person's gonna do. If you were to say to them, like, oh, I actually identify as a male, like, you just don't know that reaction, and it's scary, and it's a lot easier for a friend to step in or even just stand by your side and have that support is just so important.
And a note on that for allies who want to be supportive of their friends, there may also be situations where someone would prefer that you don't say anything.
Yeah.
It's good to have a conversation with your friends to ask what spaces they are out in and where it would be appropriate for you to jump in.
Yeah.
Do that ahead of time. Almost. Don't wait until it happens to ask what to do afterwards. It's like, hey, back there, that was really uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, I already know. I go through this like every day. So have these conversations now. Do it early.
Yeah, because I think it's important for allies also to remember they can't speak over the voices of the people in the community. Like, you're a supporting voice. You can't speak for them or represent them. So you have to have that conversation and set those boundaries so you can support them rather than being their voice, because you're not their voice and you haven't gone through what they've gone through, so you don't know. Despite how hard you try, you don't know and you don't understand.
Yeah, and everyone is going to have different preferences for different situations, so it's good to get to know your friends and what they may need.
Exactly. And how we were kind of speaking about how that goes with any kind of diversity situation. How do you think that pronouns kind of intersect with other aspects of diversity, like race, religion, culture, just in any way? Like, just your thoughts on that.
they can be really helpful if you are not meeting someone in person yet.
Mm.
Over email, you might be misgendered if you have a name that is either gender neutral or a name that is from a different language but spelled
Yeah.
in English. Someone might not know what pronouns to use for you, and
Mm.
including them in your um, like email sign off. That's where I put mine. Shows people, number one, like that you understand the importance of pronouns, but also it helps them understand a little bit about who you are and how to address you properly.
Yes.
I think that it, in that sense, becomes part of sort of your professional like profile. It's like this is how we present ourselves to each other so that we can give each other the tools to like be respectful.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one way that I know it overlaps with culture.
Yeah. And like kind of on that topic, like you don't you don't know someone's pronouns unless you ask, obviously. So like if you're just meeting someone over email, you might use gender neutral pronouns. So like how do you think for people who don't identify as male or female, maybe they're agender, maybe they're non-binary, any of those, how do you think that like gender neutral pronouns like can really help express these identities, or just pronouns in general, including like last week we talked a little bit about neo pronouns and stuff like that too.
And I will say that I don't feel like I can speak for people who feel most represented by a gender neutral pronoun or a neo
Mm.
pronoun because I don't use those. Um, but I will say I am bilingual, and I know that it can be tricky to use a gender neutral
Yeah.
pronoun in a very highly gendered language.
Mm.
Um, it can be hard for people to sort of embrace their multiple identities and multiple aspects of their identities in languages that aren't English.
Yeah.
And I know that that can pose a challenge to feeling sort of related to yourself or maybe even like to your family.
Yeah.
Um, it's an interesting sort of open question to consider. What should these gender neutral languages or these gendered languages do now that we are sort of slowly embracing more gender nonconformity
Yeah.
in language? It's an interesting linguistics question because language is always changing.
Yeah.
There is always more
exactly.
that you can add. It's not wrong. I think people think it's wrong to add,
Yeah.
and it's not, because I don't think you're subtracting anything from the language
Yeah.
by including more people.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how different languages sort of reshape themselves in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about that earlier when I was coming up with questions. I was thinking about I only took up to maybe Spanish 2 in high school, but I was just thinking like you do have to gender so many words, and like how do you go about that when someone
Mm-hmm.
isn't comfortable with that? But I guess that's just one of the many things we're going to have to navigate in the coming years, trying to kind of build a more inclusive world. And then I know you have some topics that you want to bring up.
Let me see if there's anything that I haven't covered yet.
Let's see.
Um, yes. So, one of my notes here. Um, Sometimes, even when we are in a space where we're sharing our pronouns, for example, at the beginning of the year, we're doing like icebreakers.
Mhm.
Because a lot of my like women's studies classes will do this, and it does feel like a comfortable environment. At the same time, I sort of feel like we're playing spot the queer because we're going around and it's like, okay, cis person, cis person, cis person. It's like we get to me and it's like, oh, clearly we have someone who is kind of like non-conforming to our idea of
Mhm.
what a cis person looks like. Um, and like I'm happily out as a
Yeah.
trans person, but it's still an uncomfortable position to be in. To sort of be the only visibly like queer one in the room.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. And it's like I'll be the only one in my class who is trans or who is like out as trans or who uses a pronoun set that maybe doesn't seem to align with with what everyone is expecting for him. So it can be an uncomfortable position to be in, for sure.
Yeah. I totally can like see that, especially like again, you don't know who is in these classes, especially if you're maybe one of the first people to stand up, it's almost like, I don't know, it's just hard to navigate you, and then you're stuck in that class with that person for the rest of the semester. Like, I don't know, I can definitely see how that can be scary. I can definitely sympathize with you over that. And I kind of had a question that plays into that, like the role of like parents and educators when it comes to pronouns. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
I remember seeing this quote a long time ago about teachers saying like, "Thank you, trans people, for finally teaching the world what pronouns are.
Literally.
We've been trying for so long, and finally it clicked." I think that teachers and parents have the potential to be really powerful models for
Yeah.
um, pronoun use and the practice of pronoun use, especially out loud.
Yeah.
You have to do. I am a teacher for an after school program.
Hmm.
So I have a week where all I'm doing is introducing myself. If I'm ever participating in like sort of like substituting
Yeah.
in person, I have to do so much introducing myself, and a lot of that can be with pronouns. It can be really helpful for me to see my coworkers introducing themselves with their pronouns, or to see people in the office have that as part of their like plaque
Mm-hmm.
on their desk, because it shows that this is a safe environment for me to be in. And I think that I would really like to see that as a student as well,
Yeah.
because it shows that the teacher has an understanding of the importance of this practice.
Yeah, and I think I personally really like when teachers want us to introduce ourselves with our pronouns, because it just kind of helps me, like, just know. Then I don't have to ask every time that I meet a new classmate, or I don't accidentally say something that could just really. Because even when you misgender someone, they know it doesn't come out of a place of harm, but that doesn't mean it doesn't still have a hurt and an effect. And, like, I just would hate to ever be that person who accidentally misgenders someone, and then I just know the rest of the day they're probably just not feeling their best. So
Mm-hmm.
I think educators really do have an important role. And I think a lot of people are hesitant about it because they're like, oh, it's not teachers' jobs to teach these social issues, but they're not teaching a social issue. They're just respecting someone's identity. At least in my opinion, that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's questionable to say like, well, why are you introducing like
Mm-hmm.
by criticizing this, you're questioning why someone is introducing themselves the way that they're choosing to. And it's like, well, you're doing it because you are conscious of this issue. That doesn't have to be um, an active like political.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not necessarily pushing anything by changing
Yeah.
the way that you're introducing yourself.
It's just who you are. It's like, I'm
Mhm.
me and you're you, so I'll worry
Mhm.
about me and you can worry about yourself.
Yeah, and also I don't think that it's, even if it is political, which I do think that it is. It's not bad for us to be talking about it in our classrooms, because it's also
Mm-hmm.
part of reality. We
And
make it political because we are centering trans people in sort of this political landscape, to be used as a scapegoat. But that is something that has been done throughout history so many
yeah.
times. When we look at it in our history classes, it isn't criticized as like, oh, this is too political then.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if we're not having these conversations in an educational setting, then where are we having them?
Yeah, yeah. I think that someone who is critical of that is unwilling to put in the work to be
Yeah.
understanding.
I think they're scared of learning
Yeah.
and scared of being wrong, or maybe just scared of even opinions that differ from theirs.
Mm-hmm.
But anything else on your sticky note?
Let's see. I think that most of all, I wanted to say, um, sort of my response to um, this narrative of trans people being highlighted in the media, being scapegoated in the media. Um, Transitioning is an act of radical self love.
Yes.
These are words that I first heard from a trans artist who lives in LA called Mars Wright. Um, it is a radical act of self love. By that I mean you are coming into this world and declaring who you are, because it causes you more joy
Yeah.
to share that and to express yourself in a way that feels true rather than remaining in sort of this confine that society asks you to.
Mm-hmm.
You are choosing to transition in a world that is potentially going to treat that violently. In a world that potentially won't accept you, you are doing what is true to yourself and right for yourself anyway.
Yeah.
We are not doing it because we want to sort of change the scope of things
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. We are being who we are.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, honestly.
I know,
Like,
and I think that it's lost in this narrative of sort of self-hatred that trans
mm-hmm.
people are often ascribed to. Um, you'll hear a lot of people say that we were born in the wrong body, and I think that you need to think of it differently. You need to think of it as making your own body feel like home.
Yeah.
Don't and not letting people take what is yours away from you.
Yeah.
I think that we need to start replacing this narrative of like inherent wrongness in our own bodies with this radical self-love. I am taking what is mine and making it a home,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to let you hurt me on that.
Yeah.
That is such an important thing for me to share about gender and transness and pronouns in all of this. That's like
Yeah.
what all of my opinions in here kind of center on.
Go into one
Mhm.
general thought.
I think
No,
can
you go ahead.
I think that there is sometimes no room for conversations about um, gender and gender issues when we live in a country that is constantly trying to attack trans rights. I think that sometimes we need to take a step back and realize that our community is being harmed.
Yeah.
And maybe there